Hi everyone, welcome to the video. So welcome to part 2 of the Lord of Blights Masterclass. So as I explained in the first video about preparation and planning, we were going to be painting the model inside out. So basically we're going to be starting to work on the areas that sit on the inside of the model, working outwards. So for example, the skin is the first layer on the model, so we're going to start with the skin, and it's quite a large area of the model as well. So once we get that out of the way, it allows us to move on to other areas. So the natural part for us to start is on the skin. So in the planning and preparation video, I think hopefully you guys have all watched that. If you're taking part, we said that we'd be going to do the skin in quite a warm tone, and then the green tones in quite a cool green. So there's lots of contrast going on with this. So what I've done is I thought because we're working over a black undercoat, we need to build up some layers to get the skin quite pale rather than just going straight onto pale skin. So first thing I've done is I've done a mix on my palette here. This is Bugman's Glow and Screamer Pink. It's about 80% Bugman's Glow to 20% Screamer Pink. And that's just mixed, and then I've added a bit of water to that as well to help it flow there on the palette. So if you guys want to do that, get that mix going. And then as we always do, so these are the only two parts that I've got the skin on. So obviously the body, and then there's a bit on the hand here on the hammer. So we'll do that one in a minute. But as we always do, when we're getting our base coats on, we keep the paint thin, we move the brush fast, and then allowing each area to dry before going back over it. So don't rework the area, because you'll only be moving paint that's drying, and what that will do, it will leave streaky, lumpy areas on your model. You don't want any of that. So resist the temptation to go back over, even though you can see some of the black through it now. We're going to do a few layers. It's probably going to take about 3, I would say, just to get a solid base coat, and that will allow us to lighten up as we go through. But you can notice that's quite a pinky tone to begin with. This is more of an undercoat for our skin rather than anything else, so it's just going to allow us to get lighter tones and lighter colours on top of it. So over all of the skin areas, just do this, a couple of coats, so we've got a nice solid base coat. I'm going to do this and come back and show you how yours should look as well in just a minute. Just wanted to quickly show you guys what your model should look like after your first layer. So you'll notice that it's quite streaky and there's a lot of black showing through. If your model looks like this, then that's good. We're going to do another coat once it's all dry, and then do the same again. Probably going to take about 3 coats, like I said. But don't worry if your model looks like this. This is how it should look, as long as the paint's smooth. If you notice any other little bits or bits of dust or anything in your paint, just take those off with your brush and go back over them. So you want a nice smooth finish. Okay everyone, now that we've got that base coat on, this is what we should be looking at. So if you're following along with the tutorial, you should have a nice solid base coat there of that mix. Nice and smooth without ruining any of the detail. Obviously you can see I've not worried too much about going over onto any of the cloth or armor areas. The main thing is just getting that solid base coat on first. We're going to paint over all of those areas anyway, so don't worry about that. I've also painted over the maggots and all of the boils and holes in the skin as well, so that's going to give us a base coat for any of those colours later. And I've also done the same with the hand there on the hammer. Okay, so now we want to start building up a few layers first before we shade down. As I say, we want the skin to be a little bit paler than this. It looks, to you it might look quite light, but that's not really the case. It's because it's against the black undercoat. This is still quite a dark colour. So we're going to build it up a few layers first. So to that mix, so it was the Bugman's Glow and Screamer Pink mix, we're going to add an equal part of Cadian Flesh Tone. So the same amount of the mix, same amount of Cadian Flesh Tone, add that to the mix, and then we've got that on the palette here. So this is the sort of thing we should be looking at. So it's like a warm skin tone now. And then what we're going to do is basically using the base coat we've placed on, that's really just an undercoat for this now. So we're going to go over the skin, and we're going to cover most of this layer. Now it might seem like you're ruining your hard work already, but it's an undercoat, it's an underlayer for the colours that we're going to put over the top. So what I would do is keep your paint thin. Once again, move your brush quite quickly because we're going to do a few layers. Don't worry about being too neat at this stage. We're really just getting the tone right for the skin to start with. Don't let your paint get too thick. Just keep going over. And the only place I would leave the base coat is in the very, very deepest recesses, like so down here in the folds. So don't allow your paint to run in there, just leave that there and just go over a couple of coats building up those layers. You see how I'm just moving around the model quite quickly, moving the brush quite quickly. Don't worry about being too neat. Keep your paint thin. And just go over pretty much all of the skin except for the very, very deepest recesses. So what I will do this, I'll show you what the results should look like, and then you guys can get on with that as well. Okay. Just thought I'd pop back on and show you guys that I'm still going with this stage. It takes a bit of time building up these layers, but yeah, just keep it thin, keep going over, leaving that base coat in just the deepest recesses. You don't need a lot of paint in your brush, really just kind of hitting the surface, the very top of the surface. Allow those recesses just to stay quite dark. So, yeah, so I'm still going until I'm happy. You can see what we're doing here. Just keep going over the model until we've got that solid colour there over pretty much all of the skin. And yeah, there's a lot of skin, so it's going to take you a while. So when you're doing painting of this sort of level, having patience is, you know, something that you need, especially when you're tackling large areas like this. And if you do run any paint into a recess that you didn't want it, don't worry about it, just carry on and we'll shade that back down later. So don't stress. So you don't have to be extremely accurate on this stage, just really getting those tones up. Yeah. So I'll come back once that's done, hopefully not too long. Okay, so we've got our first solid layer there now. So that was the Bugman's Glow Screamer Pink. That was the mix of 80% Bugman's Glow, 20% Screamer Pink. And then to that mix on the palette, we mixed in equal parts Cadian Flesh Tone, and that's what this layer was. We just left the base coat in the very deepest recesses. You can see that there. So it's got a nice smooth colour over all of it. And then we're going to go and do another layer of a lighter colour now. So to that mix, so we're going to do a lot of mixing in this masterclass, guys, so get used to that. So to that mix that you've got now, add in another equal parts Kislev Flesh to make another lighter skin tone there, another warm, lighter skin tone. So this is another equal amount Kislev Flesh to that mix. Basically, it's just another highlight layer which we're going to do. And we're going to do that over the skin again. And this time we're going to do it over the skin, but we're going to be leaving some of the previous layers showing in the deepest recesses, in the very deep recesses, and then underneath the shadows. So keep your paint thin. So this is where we need to start being aware of the surface that we're painting, and if there's a deep crease or a deep recess in the skin, we want to leave that. If it's a very shallow recess, we paint in that with this layer, because we're going to be picking up all the contrast and all the contours of the skin. So we're going to hit this area, but we're going to leave the crease. We're not going to paint in there. So we're blocking in our colour again now. Trying to be neat now. We will be doing some shading and glazing a little bit later, so it's not the end of the world if you're a little bit messy. At this point, we're still just building up those layers. So the skin's going to get a bit more lighter than this, so just keep going. It's very laborious as well, so take a break when you need to. It's a large area of the model to do. You can see I'm not going into the recesses here, and I'm not going underneath here, just onto the flat areas of the skin. Let the paint dry, then go over it again as you need to. So you can see I'm just moving around the model as I need to. And I'll go back to those other areas later. So we want to leave some of that previous layer showing, and that will give us a nice variation in colour. So this is dry now, so I'll go back over that and make that stronger. Hopefully you can see there now the thing we're going to be doing over the whole model. So the shoulder's dry, so I'll go back over that. This shoulder has got some contours on it, but it's so shallow, pretty much the whole thing is going to be this colour again. Just keep the brush moving. Let that dry and we'll go over it again later. I'm going to keep going over this model and I'll keep recording and showing you where I get to so you guys can follow along. There's quite a lot to do, so I think recording it all in one go is a bit much. I'll keep dipping back in so you guys can see what's going on. Yeah. Okay, we'll come back in just a minute and show you how we're going. Okay, so we're just finishing off that highlight stage now. So it took quite a few layers to keep going over, but it's worth it. So just keep layering up until you've got a solid highlight. So this leg's probably a good example to show you. So we've got very shallow creases there, so we just paint those in. And then there's some deeper ones which we've left the previous layers and the base coat colour. So if I just turn it so you guys can see, so you can do the same thing. So we're still blocking in colour, so don't worry too much about blending, because we can shade down a little bit later. This is the sort of thing we're going to keep building these layers up until we get to the tone of skin that we want. And I did the same with the hammer as well, so just painting the hand there. So you guys do the same, and then we'll go on to the next stage of highlighting. Okay, so now that that stage is complete, we're going to go on to the next stage of highlighting. So we've got our mix on the palette here, so you should have a mix that looks like this now. And what we're going to do is we're just going to mix in another equal parts Kislev flesh. So just taking that out of the pot. I'm using an old brush to do this mixing here. Save wear and tear on your decent brushes. Just mix that in. So we're going to end up with a colour that's somewhere in between our previous mix and Kislev flesh. So it's not too far away from Kislev flesh now, but not as light. So this is going to be our next stage of highlighting. So that's ready there. I'll add a touch of water to that as well. So I think at this stage now we're really going to start working on blending up the skin. So before it was really just blocking in colour so that we can work up to a lighter tone of skin. But now we've got somewhere near to the tone of skin that we want. So we're really going to start focusing on getting some nice blends now. So this leg is a good area to show you guys. Keeping the paint thin. Adding lots of water. And this stage will take a lot of time, so you need to be patient with it. So, but the results that we want, they're worth the time we're going to spend on it. So leaving our previous layers showing in the recesses and where they need to be. And just gradually highlighting up, focusing on the top areas, leaving the bottom areas in shadow. So we're going to get a nice amount of contrast on the skin now. You'll notice I've not got too much paint on my brush. I'm just going back to the palette when I need to. Going for the raised areas. The next stage after this will be Kislev flesh on its own. but this is a very important stage, I think, this one. And we're just going to continue that over the whole model, so on the arm. And as always, let that layer dry, then go over it if you need to. So like on this arm muscle here, I'm blending upwards because that's where the light is going to be more intense. And then leaving this area in shadow. So always sort of moving the brush upwards because that's where the light's going to be. Stronger, so that's where you release the brush. So I'm going to go around the model. I'll come back in a minute and show you how I'm getting on. You guys carry on. Okay, so I thought I'd pop back to show you how we're getting on. So still highlighting through this stage now. So I've done the back area. There, just building it up. And I'm just working my way around to the front now. Just doing the same thing really. So hitting the top surfaces. So this is where the light's going to be. Drawing the brush upwards, like so. And leaving the shadows that we've got there from the previous layers. Keeping the paint very thin. Hopefully you guys are using a wet palette for this. You don't have to, but it helps when we're mixing all these paints. You can just come back at any time for a different painting session and carry on. So working upwards. So I'm going to finish this stage off and show you how it looks at the end of the stage, and then we can move on. And hopefully we're getting somewhere with this skin. I know it's taken a while. It's the biggest part of the model and it's obviously the most important part as well. So we'll keep going. Okay, so that's that stage complete now. So we've got that highlight on there. You can start to see we've got some transitions going on. The skin, we're still working on those highlights now. We'll do a few more. Hopefully you're still with it. And just have a bit of patience. It does take time. Just have a break if you're getting a bit fed up. And do the same with the hammer as well. But the main thing we're aiming for is smoothness. And obviously we've started building up some of the difference between light and shade now. You can see that. So the next stage is we're just going to use pure Kislev flesh. So we're moving out of the mixes for a little while. So that should hopefully feel a little bit better. So thinning down Kislev flesh on your palette. And then once again, I'll show you a bit on the leg first. It's a good area to start with. So keeping it very thin, blending it up, concentrating on the raised top areas, leaving the previous colours showing where they need to be in the shadows. So you don't want to cover up all of your previous work, just placing this highlight very thinly where it needs to be, and we'll let that dry, then go over it again. So if you want to take your painting to the next level, this is the sort of speed and application you should be going for. So people often ask, how long do these models take? So a character model like this would probably take about 4 days, as in 4 work days, so 8 hours sitting down. So I'm going to start going over this and I'll come back in a minute and show you how we're getting on. So I'll show you guys, we're still going with the Kislev flesh stage. So you'd still be blending up, concentrating on the raised areas. Just working around the model. Worked on the back to the arm as well, the legs. So I'm just on this area now. Keep your paint thin, and you can just keep adding to it if you need to. Drawing your brush upwards. So we want to get a nice smooth blend from shade to light as we go through. It's interesting, there's loads of contours on this model, so we can play around quite a lot. What we don't want is deep, dark shading in shallow contours, so that's what we've got to keep an eye on. Just making sure the highlights and the shading is placed sympathetically to the model and how it's sculpted. So yeah, we're just going around now. So I'm going to finish the Kislev flesh stage and then come back and show you the result of this stage. Okay, so the Kislev flesh layer is now finished. So if I just show you that on the model there, you can see, I think this area is quite good to see. You can see we've got some blending going on now, light and dark, some smooth shading. Don't worry if yours isn't as smooth as what you'd like. At the minute we're going to go back and we can glaze down later. So I did that, and also did, as before, just did the hand. Just there. So we're highlighting again. This time I'm using Ushabti bone. So I've just got that on the palette. So thin that down with water. Then we're going to go through the same process. Just test it on your hand first. And we're really just hitting the top areas now. Keeping it thin. Leaving our previous layers showing where needed. So it should be creating quite a lot of contrast now on your skin. So same as before, go over it, let it dry. If it needs another layer, do it again. You get any areas like this, just draw it off with your brush to neaten up whilst it's still wet. So if you imagine the light's casting down from above, so we just want to hit those top areas. So I'm going to go around the model a bit more with the Ushabti bone and come back again and show you how we're getting on. Okay, so I'm still going with the Ushabti bone stage. So just highlighting up now. When it comes to like these rounded areas, just draw your brush into the centre and release it in the centre, like so. The same with these softer areas, and keep repeating that until you're happy. So you need stuff on the back. And once I've done with this whole skin stage, I'll take a photo as well. Take some photos and I'll put them up at the end, so you guys can use them as reference if you need to. So I think the video camera always shows it slightly differently to what it's actually like. So the photos, you guys can have a look at that. So obviously just using even less of this colour now than what we was previously using. Just really working on the top areas to create that contrast. You can see what we're doing. So I'm going to finish off the belly area and the arm, and then we'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, so that's the Ushabti bone highlight stage done. So I'll just show you guys what we've done now. So hopefully if you're following along like this, your model should be looking something like this. And I, once again, did the same thing with the just a small amount of skin on the arm with the hammer. So I promise we'll do something else soon, but we're going to keep highlighting for another stage. So I've just thinned down some Screaming Skull. So we'll do this highlight stage and then we'll do some shading and some glazing and things like that. But we're getting there now. So once again, keeping it thin, just test it, make sure it's flowing nicely. And then highlighting up, and we're really just hitting those top areas now. Leaving all of our previous work there. So as like I say, we'll do these highlights and then we'll do some shading and play with some colour and things, and then we'll balance the skin back out later with more highlights and things. So I don't want to finish the skin completely until we've painted other parts of the model. Really want to get some other colours on there so we can see what else we want to do with the skin a little bit later. But I'm just getting the bulk of that work done now. So just using a small amount of paint and adding a fine highlight there. Then I'm going to do that over all the skin areas. The Screaming Skull. So you might be thinking that the skin looks a little bit bland at the minute, but like I say, we'll get some colours and have some fun with it a little bit later. But we have to do the stage so that it allows us to do that later. So I'm going to go over with the Screaming Skull and come back and show you how it's going. Okay, so I thought I'd just pop back on and show you how we're getting on. So we're still working up the Screaming Skull stage now. So just keeping the paint very thin. Just blending it upwards towards those lightest areas. So we're leaving this area. We're going to work up here. Working towards those lighter areas again. So hopefully you start seeing the transitions we've got going on now. Keeping the paint very, very thin. Don't worry about these spots too much for now. We're going to be putting a colour over those. So just ignore them pretty much. So I'm going to keep going over this area, sort of lighten it up. So I've done the back. And then I'll do the hand as well, and then we'll come back and show you the result of that in just a minute. Okay, so the Screaming Skull highlight stage is done now. So if I just show you the model, what it's looking at right now. So I've highlighted up quite a bit now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shade down a bit, maybe add a bit of colour before we do any final highlights and things like that. So as you can see, the skin, it looks, we've blended up a bit, so it's looking pretty good, but it's lacking a bit of colour and a bit of depth still. And I did the same with the hand as well. Let me just show you guys that as well. So got a reference for the highlights and the shadows. This is a small area of skin there. So what I did next was I mixed Screamer Pink and Cantor Blue together on the palette. So it's created sort of like a nice natural plum colour there on the palette. So that was about 70% Screamer Pink, 30% Cantor Blue. And I've thinned that down. We're creating sort of wash consistency with that. And we're going to be placing this into the deepest recesses. So we're keeping that warm tone on the skin. So I've just loaded a bit of that on the brush there. You see we keep it quite thin. And then I'm going to go around the model, finding the deepest creases and just placing a little bit in where it's needed. Not too much. So let that dry. We go around the area where it meets the cloth as well a little bit. So only in the deepest recesses. If you do it in all of them, it's going to make everything way too harsh. We're basically describing the shape of the model now with the shading and highlighting. If you keep the paint thin, it should just run in there for you and do the job. Just in there. The tail is a bit of a weird thing. I'm going to glaze this to like a warm colour at the end, so we'll leave the tail for now. I'm just going to glaze around it. So this is actually quite a fun part of the skin process. I know it was quite painful getting all the highlights on, but if you've made it this far, well done. It's going to be worth it when it's done. So really put in that warm tone now. And what we'll do is all of these areas, like the holes in the skin, we'll do a glaze. We'll put this colour in there as well. So it'll act as a base coat for the next stage we do with that. So just drop that in there as well. A little bit there. Just in the deepest creases. We'll run it where it meets the cloth as well. So what you don't want is where the cloth meets the skin. You don't want like a harsh black line between the two. If you can have the shade colour of this surface and this surface in between where they meet, it gives a very natural break between the two surfaces rather than just like black lining. So it's a trick that illustrators and animators do, to have the shade colour around the thing that they're working on rather than like a black line. It makes it feel much more natural. That's what we're going to do. So rather than showing you the whole thing, I'm just going to go around finding all the deepest recesses and putting this wash in there, and I'll come back and show you how the model's going to be looking. Okay, so we're pretty much done with that shading stage now. So like I said earlier, the bit with the tail, that we're going to basically, that mix that we've got, the Screamer Pink and the Cantor Blue mix, just bring that down again. So we've got like a glaze. Just glaze that towards the end of the tail. So the end of the tail is getting darker and has a bit more colour in it. So this will just make it feel a bit different and pretty disgusting as well. It'll stand out for the model a little bit more. So whilst that's drying, I'll show you guys. We've got that shade in there. This back area looks a bit messy because it's going to have the hangman's noose piece on there later. The maggots have had that shade put all over them as well, as have all of the holes in the skin. So they've got a bit of a shade in them now as well. So we've got some nice depth going on. And once this is dry, you go over it again a few times till it's nice and strong in colour. Just at the end. Okay, we'll let that dry and come back in a minute, go on to the next stage. Okay, so we're going to go on with a little bit more shading now because we've still got some very deep recesses which need some more depth, some more shading in there. And what I did was, to that mix I added more Cantor Blue, and I also added just a touch of black as well. So we've got this sort of colour going on here. It's a very dark, natural purpley blue. And that, we're just going to put that into the very deepest areas for our final sort of shade for now. So just a small amount on the brush, carefully placing it where we want it. And if you're not too sure, just do a small amount, let it dry, and then have a look, and you can always add more after. I'm going to add that around, once again, where the areas meet the other areas, so around the cloth. And I'll also put it in around the edge of those holes in the skin as well. So we're going to paint these areas as if there's a fatty layer of tissue which is being exposed. So I'm just going to paint around those. Just adding that definition that we want. Once again, just finding the deeper recesses. So definitely under here it's going to be quite dark. Obviously in here, so being very careful. Let that dry and go in again. Keep working those recesses until you're happy. I think once this stage is done, we'll probably glaze some colour on it, and that should be quite interesting. So yeah, I'm going to go around, find the deepest recesses and show you guys how we get on with that. Okay, so that's the shading stage done there. So I'll just show you guys there. I've just gone into the deepest recesses and then around the belly, maggots and details once again. Just get that definition. Go around. I also glazed it at the end of the tail as well a little bit more. And then I did the in between the fingers on the hand as well, just a little bit where it was needed. So like I said, we're going to start adding a bit of colour now. So I'm going to use a contrast paint, which is Magos Purple. If you don't have this, so I understand not everybody might have these, just thin down some Screamer Pink. It should do a similar job. So, but I'm going to use Magos Purple here. And I'll thin that on the palette with water as needed. We don't need to worry too much about thinning it with contrast medium, because we're only really just going to be adding some colour. So this is a good area to show you. So around these areas where the holes are, where the skin might be quite raw, we're going to glaze into the middle. So pulling the brush in towards the middle, and we want to add a bit of colour around it to give it a bit of interest. So whilst that's dry, I'll go onto this area. So we're working over those highlights that we've added. So I'm using a small amount of paint here, just glazing it in towards the middle. And it'll be very subtle to begin with. Then the more you go over it, the stronger it will be. So I'll go over this area again now, pulling it in. You can see it's just got a little bit of colour on it now. Go over these areas, building it up as we need to. And then we'll do the same on all of these sort of areas on the model. So just a small amount around the belly. So imagine the skin's going to be pretty horrible and pink around there. So we'll glaze some colour in there. We'll go around all of these areas and come back and show you how we're getting on with it. Okay, so that's all the glazing done with the Magos Purple. You can see it's just quite subtle. I just concentrated around all of the holes and scars in the skin. Just a little glaze around it. Don't worry too much if you get some marks just around the edge from where it's gone over your blending. We're going to glaze back over those later with the skin highlight colour, so don't worry about it too much. Like here on the shoulder, you can probably see is a good example. So yeah, we'll go over that later. This stage is really about punching some colour in now, and that's the most important thing. So I'm going to do same thing again, but with Vulpus Pink, which is another contrast paint. So it's a little bit stronger in pigment, so we're going to have to thin that down a bit more. But I'm just going to place that really just around the edges now of those scars, because it's quite a strong pinky colour. If you don't have this, I think Screamer Pink, and just mix a bit of red in with that. If you don't have this contrast paint, it should give you a similar effect. So really just going around and just hitting just over the edges now, you can see. And I'll go around all of these areas. And we're going to highlight over these afterwards anyway. So I'll carry on with this and we'll come back and I'll show you how that looks. Okay, so we've got a nice pinky tone going on now with the skin all around the holes and the scarred areas. Which looks pretty disgusting so far, so we'll keep adding some more colour now as well. I'll also show you that I've just done that around the knuckles as well. Like I say, we're just punching the colour in a minute, so don't worry about it being too messy here and there, because we can close back over with our highlights there just to pull those back in. And I also did it around his mouth there on the lip, you can see. I did that. So what I'm going to do now is, we're talking about playing with a lot of contrasting colours on this model. So we've got some warm pink tones, and to contrast with that, I thought we'll do all of the spots and boils in some green tones. Because if we do those red or purple, that'll be even more, so it might be too much. So just to add some interest, that we'll do those in green tones, like Nurgle's Rock could be green, so we'll do that. And with the green tones being on the skin and on the armour, it'll actually pull all the model together and make it feel as one, which would be nice. So I'm going to use another contrast paint, which is Plague Bearer Flesh. So there's those of you that are groaning, saying, well, we don't have it. Hopefully you might have Elysian Green or something similar. So you can thin that down and it will give a similar effect. So I'm going to use Plague Bearer Flesh because it's, these are great for glazes, basically contrast paints. So I'm just going to add some of that to the palette. Just do a test on the hand there. And then I'm going to find all of the, hopefully, as we highlighted, just highlight over the spots as well as we're going up. Just glaze really carefully around each of those spots. We'll let that dry. And then we'll find another one. And we'll go around all of them. And it's going to add a lot of interest to the skin, having the green in here as well. So, I mean, your first thought is to do them, oh, it's a spot, so we'll do it red, but I've done them green before in the past and it's worked quite well. So I'm just finding them here. And what it'll do is it'll actually make all of this pink area seem even more intense because the contrasts sit next to each other. So I'm going to go around all of these. This is a nice colour as well, with a fitting name. So just picking all these out. So I'll carry on with this. I'll show you how it looks in a minute. Okay, so the Plague Bearer Flesh is done now. You can see that I've just gone over, glazed over all of the boils and spots and things. So it's adding some different colour into the model. So that's quite a yellowy green. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just thin down some Creed Camo, which is another contrast paint. If you don't have this, just thin down some Caliban Green. It'll be very similar. Like I said, the reason I'm using contrast paints is because they're great for glazing, but you can just thin down paints if you want to. I prefer to use these when it comes to glazes. So I'm going to thin that down. It's quite a strong in pigment, and I'm just going to glaze that around those spots a little bit more sparingly. Just want to get a bit more green in there, a bit more shading around them. So yeah, not too much, just a bit more green. Leaving the centre of the spots quite light. Don't worry about it if it's messier than what you like right now, because we're going to be heating it up later. Let's keep it thin. So I'll go around these and we'll come back in a minute. Okay, so before we start neatening up and highlighting, I want to go and paint inside all of these holes in the skin. We're going to do it sort of like a fatty layer of skin, so we're going to do it horrible sort of yellowy creamy colour. So I'm just going to use Zemzi Desert, which is quite a yellowy brown. So use that or an equivalent. And then obviously I'm doing this before the highlight. We go back to highlighting and neatening up because you don't want to hit any of the edges. So this is a good time to do this. So just painting carefully inside those first. So I'll take a few coats, leave the purple wash that we added earlier around the edge because that's going to be our sort of shade and break between the colours. So just very carefully go inside all of those. I'm going to leave these three, I think, and I'll probably do those like a bluey colour instead. I'll show you that a little bit later. So I'm just going to paint in all of these and I'll come back and show you. Okay, so we've got those holes sort of painted in with that yellow colour there, so just to represent the fatty flesh. So I'm going to just thin down some Magos purple on my palette, and I'm just going to go over real quick, just go over the yellow areas that we just painted, just to pull it in to the skin just a little bit because it feels like the yellow is quite harsh. So I'm just going to glaze just a small amount over, just allowing it to drop into any recesses that might be there. Just that's in all of them. Just going over. So we'll let that dry and then we'll highlight those. So I'm going to leave these. I might do these a blue colour. So we'll have a look, think about doing some blue here to represent maybe some intestines that are bulging through, and then his bottom lip, we can get that nice blue colour as well. So we've got some cool tones going on the skin as well. Okay, cool. Come back in a second. Okay, so we'll give those fatty areas a highlight now. So I'm just going to use some Ushabti bone. Just thin that down on the palette, and then just working towards the top. Just adding a highlight inside, like so. We'll do the same on this. It's where it needs it. Leaving some of the base coat yellow colour showing. And I'll do that across all of these now. We don't want to cover all of it, just have a slight highlight there. So I'll do that and come back now. And I think I'll add another highlight of Screaming Skull on those larger areas where I can. Maybe in the larger ones, just a little dot here and there. And it's probably going to be quite reflective because it's wet and horrible. So just a little dot of Screaming Skull here and there. There we go. Great. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint in these three areas here, and I'm just going to paint his bottom lip out in the fang. So it's a nice denim blue colour. What this is going to do is going to put some cold tones in to the skin because it really needs it. I'm just going to paint those out really carefully. A couple of coats of that. So I'll do those three. And I'll also carefully paint out his bottom lip as well. I'll do those for now. So I'll finish that and come back. Okay, so I'm just going to give those areas a little highlight now with rust grey. So working towards the top. Leaving the fang showing. So it's going to be quite nice. Sorry if you can hear any noise today, guys, from outside. There seems to be loads of people making loads of noise, but I want to get this done. So we'll keep going. So we want to highlight towards the top, and we want to give this a slightly shiny appearance. And then the same, the bottom lip. The reason we did that blue is if we have blue down here, it would be nice to have it up here as well. And I think it will draw a nice amount of attention to the face if we do this blue, because it's such a contrast to everything else. It's quite an unusual thing to do as well, so it'll be quite nice for this Nurgle guy. So that's rust grey. Finish this highlight, then we'll go on to the next one. Now moving on to Fenrisian grey now. So as we always do, just leave the previous highlight showing, working further towards the top. Just keeping that cool blue colour, so it's contrasting with all those pinks and yellows that we've got going on. Same with the bottom lip. Just a bit more of a highlight. Okay, just finish this, then we'll do a bit more. Now for the next highlight on those blue areas, we're going to jump over to using Screaming Skull. So at the minute, that blue is sitting very harshly against all of those other colours, so we're going to use the highlight colour from the skin to highlight the blue. This is a cool little trick to do if your model's looking a little bit separated by all the different colours, so highlighting with the same colours can sometimes pull things in. So it's going to naturally highlight this blue for us as well. So just doing that. It'll help it feel a little bit better. I also wanted to do it on the lip as well, because the lip felt like it was really jarring quite a lot. So we'll just do highlight of Screaming Skull there, just dabbing it on like this to give it a bit of texture. Like so. So there we go. So that lip looks a little bit better now. And I'll finish highlighting these up. Okay, so I'm just going to mix Zemzi Desert and the Shabti Bone together on the palette, 50-50. Add some water, and I'm just going to go around and I'm just going to add a little highlight in the middle of all of those spots now. So just a little dot in the centre. It's the same for all of them. These larger ones you'll have to highlight the top. I'm just going to go around all those spots. Adding this highlight will help them sit better onto the skin as well. I'm just going to finish that now. Now on those larger spots, I think we'll just have another highlight of Screaming Skull, so just on the very top. Just on the larger ones. Go around those. Add a little dot highlight there. The ones on the shoulder I've made look like they're slightly shiny, like they're going to burst or something. Pretty disgusting. So add your highlights on those. I'll go around and finish these highlights off, and then we'll move on. Okay, so I think for now we've got enough colour in the skin. You're probably wondering why we've gone and messed up all our hard work, all that highlighting and blending, but as I say, adding this colour is important. So we're going to go back now to glazing highlights back over the skin. What we're going to do is we're going to pull the colour into the skin by glazing over it slightly where it's needed. So just thinning down Kislev flesh to start with. So maybe a good area to show is on the shoulder here. So just glazing over really gently where we put that purple glaze, and what it'll do is it'll just pull it into the skin and make our blend a little bit better. We're going to go around all of those areas with some very thin Kislev flesh. So on the chest there as well. I'm just going to make it nice and smooth. Give us a nice transition. So like on the belly is a good place to show. really carefully going around. And go over it again here once it's dry. And it'll look really nice once it's dry. Just keep going over those areas. Very thin. Especially if you get like slight tide marks on the glaze that you put on, this will get rid of those for you. So don't take out all of the purple that we put on. You just want to really just smooth out the transition between the two colours with this glaze. So I'm just going to go around all of these areas, just pulling that purple in there with the glaze. We'll come back in a second. So whilst you've got the Kislev flesh out, it's a good opportunity just to neaten up any mistakes that you might have made. So I've got a couple here on the back, so I'm just going to neaten those up. Also the tail that we blended out is missing highlights on the end, so we'll run the highlight with the Kislev flesh around there. Highlight to the tip. Just a thin highlight on it. We'll highlight down where the tail's got the detail. I'll finish that in a second and carry on. But yeah, so just keep going. Really, we just want to smooth out if there's any tide marks or any imperfections in where the pink glaze went, where the purple glaze went. So, cool. And we'll come back in a second and we'll carry on. Okay, so now I'm going to go around the skin and I'm just going to re-establish any highlights with the Shabti bone that may have been knocked back with the glazing stages. So just going back over those, thin down, just going over, because no doubt when you do all your glazing you take off a few highlights. And also at this stage what I'll do is I'll go round, I'll just show you. So we've got the lip of the holes in the skin. I'll go around those with the Shabti bone as well and give those a highlight. Just like so. So you have to be very careful with this. We just want to hit the edge. So I'm going to go around all of those. And the same around here as well. So we're going to have a highlight, and I'll highlight all of these holes as well, the smaller ones. And if I've knocked any other highlights off, then I'll add those back on and also highlight around these. So I'll do that now and come back and show you how it should look. Okay, so that highlight's been added everywhere now. You can see I've just picked out around all of the edges, all those details as well, the little holes here and there. And this has helped describe the shape of different things. And I've just pushed a few highlights back on that I felt were missing after we glazed down so much. You can see what I've done with the tail there as well. So if you want to do the same. So I think it's looking good. Now we're going to do some more highlights, unfortunately. So this is going to be the last highlight for a while. So I think we'll do another highlight on the skin, and then we'll move on to other areas of the model. And then we will definitely be coming back to the skin a bit later on in the process, because whilst it looks pale enough now and finished, once we've got all these other colours on, we'll probably want to go back in and play around with some different things on the skin, maybe like re-establish the highlight again at the end. But we'll have a look. So I think we've had enough of skin for a while now, and you guys are probably very fed up with it. And we're going to leave the maggots for now. We'll do those a bit later. We'll just leave those that colour, that base coat colour that we put on the skin. And yeah, so we'll do this last highlight, so I won't torture you guys much longer. So this is pallid witch flesh, which is like an almost white colour, so it's like an off-white, and we're thinning this down very heavily on the palette, very heavily, so it's very dilute there. And all we're going to do is just go over the very, very top areas that we want that final highlight. And we're just glazing this on, so we're not painting lines, we're just glazing on in that area where we want that final highlight. And we'll paint in some lines later, but at the minute we're just going to basically glaze in, pulling the brush into the middle just to get that a little bit more contrast on the skin before we move on. So just picking out those top areas, don't go overboard, just a bit, so like on the arm here at the top. You'll notice when I move my brush, I'm sort of gathering the paint into the middle as it flows off the bristles. Same with this side. Just there, you can see the sort of thing that I'm doing. And same here, look, just small amount, gathering it into the middle. And then release the brush in the centre. And I'll go over all of these areas and just add a bit more contrast onto the skin and come back and show you how we're getting on. Okay, so just coming to the end of this final highlight for now anyway. Like I said, we'll come back to the skin a bit later. We'll have to do a bit more work once all the other colours are on the model. But one thing that it's nice to do is add these sort of reflections underneath in the shadows, because the ground that this guy's going to be on is probably going to be reflecting light upwards as well. So this is something you can do on display miniatures and miniatures when you want to take it to another level. If you look at artwork, you'll see that the ground actually reflects light upwards as well, and you'll sometimes have small highlights in the shadows, which is nice to add, especially when you get like areas like this. You can have like a slight highlight underneath here, and it helps describe that shape just a little bit more. See, made quite a big difference there, and it's nice. So I'm going to do that underneath some of these areas. Just do that now before we finish with the skin stage. So just going to go under. I think it will also give his skin sort of a slightly slimy appearance as well, but this is really supposed to be representing any light bouncing up off the ground, because I think I'm going to give him like a snow base, so that's definitely going to be reflecting light upwards. So I'm going to add those under here as well. So basically a thin line in some of the shadows. I'll do this and then show you where I've placed them afterwards, and then we'll do a recap as to where we are. Okay, so that's the pallid witch flesh highlight and the underneath highlights all done now. So you can see that. I'll just turn the model for you. So like I said before, we're going to get back to the skin later on. Do like a final highlight and just a little tidy up once we've got more colours on the model. And the hammer hand is done as well. So like I said, I did a bit of purple glaze on the knuckles, and I've just highlighted those over as well. So what I'll do is, because the video doesn't really show the colours as they should, is I'll take some pictures and I'll put them up in a minute and do a recap, and I'll also put those pictures on my Instagram account as well for reference, so you guys can look at those anytime you want on there, and it should help you with this part of the painting as well. So back in a second with a recap. Okay, so there's a photograph there of the finished skin. Like I said before, I'll put some reference pictures on my Instagram account, so I'll try and get some close-ups there for you to basically use in your painting. But there you can see the photograph there shows it slightly differently to the camera. So yeah, you can see all the blending and all the highlights we did and the colour that we added in. And so we're going to go back to the skin a little bit later. Once we've balanced out the rest of the model with some different colours, you'll find that the skin will appear darker once we get other colours on. So, and there's the back as well, so you can see the work that we've done on that piece as well. So if you've made it this far, congratulations, because the skin is quite a tough part of the model, so we're just building up all of those layers was difficult. We'll go into some other areas next time. And I'll see you in the next video, guys. Cheers. Bye.